Frank's Red Hot is the perfect blend of flavor and heat, so you can use an entire bottle to make recipes like buffalo chicken dip or buffalo nachos, or even things that don't start with buffalo. Frank's Red Hot, I put that on everything.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Jeff. I have no song.
What?
I'm not doing songs until we're back to normal here, dude. My creativity is gone. In
Yeah, I know. With everything going on, it's like creativity is sort of like a little bit low on the importance scale, and you know, you kind of got to feel it, right? Kind of got to feel it.
It might be that or the toddler. I'm not sure. I'll blame it on the pandemic and the systemic the confrontation of systemic racism that we're all doing as well. So that's just draining me. I have nothing left for song parodies at the start of our podcast.
Our beloved soccer team got its ass handed to it today, so that didn't really help either.
Our lifelong team, that was an embarrassment.
Yeah, Borussia
ruined my
Dortmund.
day.
Dortmund. Oh well. So hey, you want to tell them about the show?
Yeah. Hey, this is Podcast versus Everyone. I'm Craig Powers. With me is Jeff Nusser.
Hello.
And today we have a special guest. He was kind of sort of our former boss at SB Nation.
It's not even kinda. He definitely was. He was definitely my boss. But he's not my boss anymore, so screw you, Matt Brown.
Yeah, man.
Wait, that's not what we're doing here.
Oh, we trapped you, man. We caught you in. We have a list of complaints.
Listen, this is all Brian Floyd's problem now, man. I mean, I don't work there anymore. Send it to him.
And Brian Floyd is our fault in the first place.
Yeah,
so.
it's specifically my fault.
Yeah,
like,
it all goes back to you.
Yeah, it's true. It's a big damn circle. Oh well. So hey, all right. So I'll introduce Matt. So Matt Brown used to work at SB Nation. As we referenced, he was my boss, more or less, at with the college team. I think they're called the Team Brands now. They've been called all sorts of things in the decade that I've been doing this. And Matt is well, first of all, Matt's a really cool guy. So and I don't even have to say that anymore because he's not my boss anymore. So I don't have to suck up anymore. But that's legit true. Matt also tells the corniest jokes on Twitter, which is also a really good reason to follow him on Twitter. But now that Matt no longer works at SB Nation, and he was a casualty, and I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but a casualty of the current situation, as many people at SB Nation were. But Matt is taking that lemon juice and trying to make some lemonade, and he's kind of striking out on his own, and he's got an awesome newsletter that I know he's got sort of big ideas and big plans for, and I'm sure we'll give him some space to talk about that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have Matt on is because I think the thing I enjoy most about your Extra Points newsletter, and I by the way, I love the name Extra Points because it's like it's sort of like it's kind of football adjacent, right? Or athletics adjacent. It's like extra. It's the stuff that's off the field that a lot of times people don't talk about or aren't all that knowledgeable about. And one of the things I really love about your newsletter is that you take these concepts that a lot of fans only pay sort of cursory attention to, right? They aren't always paying attention to the TV contracts. They're not always paying attention to legislation. They're not always paying attention to trends across higher education, that kind of stuff. And that's like right in your wheelhouse. And so I guess I wanted to have you on because I thought that would be a really cool thing for you to maybe talk about during this downtime, which is sort of the perfect time to address all this. So maybe, Matt, like what's it been like for you trying to kind of get this up and running, get it off the ground, and, kind of strike out on your own at a time when everything is just sort of like chaos?
Yeah, I have to admit, this, in many respects, this is actually perfect timing because the bulk of what I love college football and I love watching college football and I care about what happens during the games, but the stories that I'm really, really interested in, what I think I've increasingly dedicated myself to are the stuff that doesn't have as much to do with what actually happens on the field. It's a lot of these political stories or financial stories or higher education stories that are really college football and college basketball stories too. And when there's no sports, this is what everybody has to write about right now, and that's already been my beat for a little bit. So on one hand, this timing is good. On the other hand, this timing is terrible because I'm trying to make this an actual business and ask people for money when we have 20% unemployment. And I'm also trying to do everything here, not just writing 4 times a week and conducting interviews and doing research and all of these things, but also all of the back-end entrepreneurial stuff. I'm trying to do sales. I'm trying to talk with lawyers and accountants. And I've got 2 little kids, and the schools aren't open. So I'm doing a lot of stuff here at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and it's hard. But for me, I don't feel like I really have a great alternative because it's not like there's media jobs I could go get, right? No one's hiring. No one's really hiring for HR or marketing. I can't even really leave the industry. And so I've built something that people already seem to like. I know that the kind of content that I'm producing has an audience. It's not a huge audience. There are a little bit of niche stories, but there is definitely an audience. And so I think I owe it to myself to give this a shot. And it's been terrifying the past couple of months, but also really exciting. You get this huge dopamine rush when you log in. You see 2 other people have decided to pay for what you're actually doing. I've got several athletic directors and people within athletic departments who are reading this, which is not what I really anticipated when I launched the project, but I think that's also useful and good to know, and an endorsement that I'm not writing things that are ridiculous. And we're going to see how it goes. I'm very excited for what the next couple of months might bring.
Your last newsletter talked about the TV contracts that are going to be coming up, and that is something that is it's honestly at the forefront of the minds of a lot of WSU fans, given our particular situation. One of the smallest, if not probably the smallest athletic department in the Power 5. And so, really small budget relative to their peers. And so the TV revenue makes a really massive difference. And of course, it's well known that the Pac-12 is sort of lagged behind its peers. And as they've watched, Larry Scott do what he has done with the network and the late night kickoffs and also, by the way, getting paid less than everybody else pretty much except for the ACC. So not exactly a resounding success, and confidence is pretty low that with that contract coming up here in the next I think it expires 2024 I think, or 23.
Yeah, that sounds about
right.
But between 2024 and 2026 is when everything's being redone.
Yeah, so it's in the next few years, and so confidence is pretty low that Larry Scott is gonna deliver the goods this time around. But one of the things I found interesting about what you wrote was that that everybody you feel like or this from what you've seen, and also the analyst that was in The Athletic, just kind of talking about that the percentage rise is going to be probably about the same across the board for most people. But the problem is there's already this existing gap, which then creates kind of this exponentially widening gap. And so like, how do you feel? Like do you agree with that analysis? And is there anything the Pac-12 can do in your estimation to try and close that gap from a TV perspective, or is it just this is sort of your lot in life, Pac-12?
Yeah, it's a good question on a lot of different fronts. I've read a couple of different analysts project that not only is that a pre-existing gap likely to stay there, but when you look at the gap between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and SEC, I think it's probable that after the next round of television contracts, that gap's actually going to get even wider, where you might see a mid or low tier Big Ten team, your Indiana, a Rutgers even, you pull in $80 million in conference distribution checks a year by 2028, 2029, maybe even more than that. And the Pac-12, I think, actually will improve their Tier 1 TV rights, perhaps significantly, in their next round. But then it's hard to see where you're coming even within $25 or $30 million of that. And unfortunately, at this point, and we could fire Larry Scott out of a cannon tomorrow, and I really don't think it changes the landscape for the Pac-12 all that much, because of not just decisions that were made 8 years ago, but just the reality of your television markets and where you are in the country. This is not meant to be disrespectful, but college football is not that big of a deal in a lot of markets in the Pac-12. Even in some of these big cities, the Bay Area is just simply not a college football hotbed. There are probably more people that care about college football in Salt Lake than there are in San Francisco, despite San Francisco being much bigger.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Like that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, and when you compare that to some of these smaller metros in the Midwest and the South, where college football's a much bigger deal, that makes those areas more useful from a television perspective. It's unfortunate that the quality of play throughout the conference has deteriorated a little bit over the past couple of years, which is not what you want heading into these negotiations. And what I think is particularly tricky for the Pac-12 is you also have to figure out who's going to bid, right? Because if you got the SEC now who's going to put all of their rights on ESPN, and the ACC is putting all of their rights on ESPN, there's limited space for some of these Pac-12 games. Especially, there's I think a real chance that the Big Ten could decide to go completely all in with Fox. They already own a controlling stake of the Big Ten network. They've been showcasing Big Ten games in that noon Eastern slot a lot over this last time slot. Once you get those three leagues out of the way, then you have to figure out who has the space, like the literal programming space, to commit a gigantic resource for the Pac-12. And I know Larry Scott likes to talk about, well, maybe we'll go use Apple, or maybe we'll go to Netflix. But the risk that you run there is that you're making a gigantic exposure trade-off. And I'm not sure that athletic directors or coaches or other administrators within this league are going to be comfortable with that. Like, yeah, you might actually be able to get $8 million more from Apple TV, but then if you have to have an app to watch your games and you're completely removed from the bar scene locally, and it becomes this technical hang-up for older fans, and quite frankly for fans in maybe some rural parts of Washington or Oregon or Idaho that don't have high-speed internet. Yeah. That's a really tough sell. Like, that's what the Big 12 is seeing right now, with a lot of their fans in Kansas and West Virginia and Oklahoma have buffering problems and are not able to get that experience. So the big question for me is not, hey, what can the Pac-12 do to fix this television gap? You're going to have the television gap. You could bring in BYU and bring in Boise State and throw every academics concern out the window and alleviate that a little bit, but that's a complete political firestorm, and that's never going to happen. So the bigger question is, how do you learn to live with that deficit? Or do you advocate for rule changes that would make that deficit not a very big deal? And honestly, those are things that I think are on the table. I'll give you a quick example. I talked about this in the newsletter a little bit, and this is something that I if I was somebody with Oregon State or with you guys, or with maybe Utah, I'd be pushing for this really hard. NCAA, Larry Scott, major conference commissioners, they want something called an antitrust exemption from the federal government, which basically says we're going to give the NCAA permission to limit players' compensation through name, image, and likeness, or through cost of attendance, or some other way. We're going to cap it at some other number, and now you can't sue us anymore. Like, that's the legal definition that allows for us to have salary caps. NCAA wants that. Congress, Republicans and Democrats, are saying there's no way in hell we're going to give that to you just for nothing. But there's some athletic directors, including some on the West Coast, that have said, what if we tied that to a salary cap for coaches and administrators? And if you have that, and there's a limit to how much your athletic department can spend on a coach or spend completely, well, then the revenue difference doesn't really matter all that much. Like, yeah, okay, well, Ohio State gets another $40 million. They got to kick it to the General Scholarship Fund. We got a cap. And if that's the case, then who cares? These are the kind of things that maybe I would be pushing for if I was a school that wasn't going to reach revenue parity with athletic departments, that are probably worse than Washington State's.
Yeah, that's you made a lot of good points there, and that's something I haven't thought about. I mean, when you touched on the exposure issue, that's something that our fans deal with. I equate even the current situation with the Pac-12 network, which never found its way on DirecTV, and so that just totally cuts off. I mean, you talked about bars. Most bars have DirecTV because it has NFL Sunday Ticket, and it's only like very specific bars that carry Pac-12 network because they know they have Pac-12 fans that will come watch the games. So they have to have a second subscription of maybe Comcast or Dish Network or something just to have the Pac-12 games. And I hadn't thought about that before. And so you talk about the exposure with Apple and things like that. You're cutting it down even more. I think it's the number of homes that have Pac-12 network versus, because I've lived on the East Coast, and it doesn't come in a regular cable package if you're on the East Coast, or even like you have to get like the sports package to get it, and so people aren't even hunting it down. And then when you're talking about Apple, that you're taking an even step further, because people are already paying for 5 subscription services, so you're hoping that it lands on the one that they have or whatever. Yeah. So what they've done is create this sort of atmosphere where you have to kind of be a diehard college football or Pac-12 universe, like one of the university's fans, to go and find these games. If they're on Pac-12 network, which many of them are, your average games, like maybe the premier games might be on at 7:30 on ESPN or whatever, but 10:30 on the East Coast. But yeah, so the exposure is a huge issue, and I think that's something that we're very sensitive to now. And whenever we hear, like, we're already kind of relegated to this network that no one has at time slots that no one watches. And now we're talking about going on an app that, I have a hard enough time trying to figure out with my dad, like setting up so he can watch the Pac-12, like the Coug games.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we're so you're just and my dad's the type of person that watches sports like 12 hours a day. So it's like,
that's what it is. There's a huge generational gap. Like, I think if you were explicitly trying to market your athletic department to people under 40, you might be able to get away with just putting it on Amazon Prime, or for Apple or Quibi or whatever fly-by-night service you want to do, right? Washington State on Go 90. But if you're trying to reach everybody, you can't really do that. And I would be pretty surprised if we call them FANG, right? The Facebook, Apple, Google, Netflix, one of these other companies comes in here and buys tier 1 rights for any major conference network over the next decade, because you would be limiting your reach so much. And these institutions, even schools that I know have financial challenges like Washington State, they just can't make that trade-off. They would face an internal revolt, not just from their own coaches and administrators, but from their fans too, and potentially even politicians.
Well, yeah, and we have to worry about donors as well. And obviously the people with the money that are making the big donations are generally going to be that older generation that's not going to be maybe down with Apple TV to watch their football games. Exactly right. But I wanted to get, like, your point of this cap thing, and I don't think that's something a lot of people have thought about, but that's an interesting way to put it. Where you're just kind of forcing the like taking away the incentive to, like, because right now we see the money goes to coaching salaries, and it goes to schools having far more extravagant facilities than any professional sports team would ever have, and there's another place where that money could go to, which that's another issue, but. But this, assuming that never goes to them, to the players, then yeah, they have all this money, and sending it back to the university and through a general scholarship fund is an interesting way. So it's not really touching athletics, so, like, not touching. It's, I guess, when you're saying general scholarship fund, like the athletics one, or the university at large.
I'm thinking the university generally. Like, there's lots of different ways that you can set this up, and I'm not even certain that it's especially likely. But a lot of the conversations about revenue with college athletics and revenue parity is about what can we do to get more money. What conference realignment decisions can we make? What scheduling decisions can we make? What else can we give to our broadcast partners to get more revenue? And we've seen that's been the driving force for just about everything in college sports the last 15 years. And for a lot of schools, that hasn't really improved the experience for students. That certainly hasn't improved the experience for fans. I don't know if you think that your life as a Washington State fan is better in 2020 than it was in 2005, beyond that you get to watch games in higher definition now. I'm sure many of the other things are more challenging. And I think that there is room in this conversation to talk about what if we're looking at this the wrong way? What if we're looking at, instead of how to increase our revenue, what if it's what can we do to minimize that spending? What can we do to bring that number down, or force you to spend that money on different things? And that might mean spend it on the library, spend it on the business school, spend it on improving scholarship aid for residents out of state, use it on tuition freezes, use it to pay your adjuncts, use it for all of these myriad other things, rather than chasing the waterfall, which doesn't even give you a lot of utility if everybody else has the dang waterfall too. Like, that is what, right now it's very difficult to have that conversation or to do that under current NCAA and legal guidelines. But given that a lot of the stuff's going to get blown up, if I was the Pac-12, or if I was the Big 12 for that matter, I'd be pushing really hard for that stuff.
Yeah, it seems like something's got to radically change, because it almost and like the word that came to mind to me was death spiral. I think that's probably too dramatic, but that's kind of how it feels. It feels like it's this sort of self-perpetuating problem where these gaps are getting bigger, and the spending is getting more extravagant. And you got schools like Alabama that's got like an army of 45 analysts, right? I mean, and 18 strength coaches, and it's because why? Well, because they got that money. So where are we going to spend it, right? And so you've got this situation where there's really this growing gap, and WSU is quite proud of their football operations building that finally got built 8 years ago or whatever. But it's like that's it's great. I mean, but it's sort of like the entry level, right? Like to being relevant in Power 5. Like, they've done this, and now they're still trying to play catch up, and it seems like, I mean, they're obviously never going to catch up. Like, that's not going to happen. But it just seems like the gap is getting wider and wider and wider. And to the point where, and maybe this is a nice, sort of segue into the conversation about name, image, and likeness, because, right now, really all the best players are going to basically like 3 schools, right? Like recruiting has become, they're like that. The difference between the haves and the have-nots, I think, is really as big as maybe it's ever been. And I, I'm not as historically inclined as you are, so you can sort of correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I mean, right now, basically there are, maybe like 3, like really it's like Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, basically. And everybody else is sort of, and then you got maybe your Oklahomas in that second tier, and maybe USC someday can get back up there. But it's like, I mean, we're just, it seems like it's going to take something radical like what you suggested in order to maybe create a situation where these gaps just don't get exponentially bigger. And we end up seeing, the same 2-3 teams, battling it out for the playoff every year. Yeah,
it's tough to quantify that exactly. I think there might have been a couple of other shorter eras where we've had this level of talent stacking one place, probably around World War II, when basically everybody was either in this, like, playing for Army, Navy, or Notre Dame, which was like a naval prep school, basically, at this point. And this is a sport that historically usually does not have parity. It's rare, right, when that does happen. But right, I think you are onto something, that even in a sport where talent generally concentrates towards the same dozen or so schools, it's hyper concentrating in a couple of places now. And I think the 4-team playoff has incentivized that, where it makes more sense to try to join a super team if you're really confident that you can get a roster spot, where your path to the playoff is much more secure than a spot in maybe somewhere else within the Power 5. I know I would add Georgia to your list, and yeah, LSU just won a title and they're recruiting around that level. But yeah, it is like about 6 or 7 teams, and none of them are in the Pac-12 right now. 1.5 of them are in the Big 12. 1.5 of them are in the ACC, and 1 of them is in the Big 10. And I am sympathetic to some concerns about, like, whether this is good for the long-term health of the sport, and what kind of changes you can make to kind of rectify that a little bit, right? Because you can't have a draft. You can't take agency away from athletes. And a lot of the other potential changes that I think really would improve that imbalance are bad for the players, right? Like, you could lower the scholarship limit, and that would force good players to not go to Alabama and go to, UCLA instead. but then you're taking away scholarship opportunities for kids. Like nobody wants to do that right now. So it's possible that some changes in name, image, and likeness, I think, rather than hurting that imbalance, I think could actually help it.
So expand on that, because we've made that point before on the show. We're like, actually, maybe, since the imbalance is already bad, and since every awesome kid is going places other than WSU, maybe this presents an opportunity for a school like Wazoo in a small town, and where a player, say Gardner Minshew, right, could have an outsized influence and perhaps command some dollars that way. Maybe a smaller school is able to maybe attract a kid that they weren't able to attract before, because the idea that every kid would go to Alabama, or every kid would go to, or whatever, or if we like wink wink, there aren't boosters paying kids to come, because that would never happen, of course. No, that would never happen. But it's like, someone's like, oh, well, boosters will just pay, for kids, and they'll just stack and I'm like, these kids still want to play, right? They still want to go to the NFL. There's only one football and only so many spots on the field. So, maybe there's an opportunity to perhaps entice some talent in some ways that, really aren't available right now. What do you think about that idea? I think that's honestly exactly right. And I've talked to a couple of different economists, and I've talked to people who work at some business schools, and they've said mostly the same thing. Like right now, I get the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, well, the rich will just get richer. Well, in recruiting, the rich almost literally can't get richer. Like, you're only allowed to sign 25 kids. Right. Yeah. And Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State, they're signing 22 blue-chip kids, and 6 of them are going to transfer in a year because they can't see the field. Like, then you're exactly right. What we have is, I'm inclined to think that schools with very passionate fan bases in more rural communities are actually going to be able to offer more name, image, and likeness opportunities than schools in some of these larger markets, where especially schools in larger markets that don't have that kind of fan penetration, right? Like, hey, look, Miami's a big market. A lot of people care about Miami football. When Miami's 7-5 and the Orange Bowl has 7,000 people in it, or whatever they're calling it right now, like your Q score is tiny. But if you go to a place like Greenville, North Carolina, where ECU is, or go to Pullman, or go to Starkville, or go to Lincoln, and some of these smaller areas where State U, where that school is the first, second, third, and fourth biggest thing in that area. If you're good and if you have a personality, yeah, you can capture just about everything local. And then one of the great things about a lot of these likeness opportunities are people keep talking about the car dealership, right? Or the local bar. But I'm telling you, the big money for this is going to be with monetizing social media, and you can get those opportunities anywhere as long as you've built yourself a brand and an identity. And I think it's going to be easier to do that in a rural place, or a place where you might have a little bit more access to players than you are at a gigantic metropolis. And so then I think it's a great opportunity, because then Wazoo can go in and talk to some of these kids who are in suburban Los Angeles and literally be able to roll out a plan and say, here's what our school is going to do to help you maximize these opportunities. Here's what we're going to do to help you maximize your fundraising opportunities and your brand development opportunities. And if you don't make it to the NFL, you're going to come away and you're going to learn all of these really important social skills that will help you in your other career. And also, you're going to be able to make actual money. And you can do that while starting. And you can have some of those things in Los Angeles, and have to fight 60 other people for those same things and might not ever get to play. And that's a compelling narrative, I think. Yeah, I think that WSU is actually trying to get out in front of this. On our other podcast, Kooks and Hour, with Michael Preston, he interviewed our new football coach, Nick Rolovich, and he actually talked about how Wazoo is starting to get out in front of this, where they're already talking to kids about how to use social media to build their brand and how to, basically strategically do this. And I thought that was sort of brilliant. And I don't know how many different departments are going down that road, but just the idea that, okay, here's what we can offer. Like, we can coach you on how to build value for yourself. We can train you on this. So when you come to WSU, like we can't offer you endorsements, but we can give you all of the tools to go out and get them, and put yourself in a position to collect on that stuff, to put yourself in a position to earn those dollars or to be, a brand ambassador for somebody or whatever, which I thought was actually, WSU's not been the most forward-thinking athletic department historically, but the guy who's our athletic director now, Pat Chun, who you are probably familiar with as an Ohio State guy, has been just absolutely brilliant in terms of this stuff. So, I guess it just sort of reinforced your point. I think there's a real opportunity there and a chance to go about things in a different way and sell their program in a way that they just can't right now, because they're not, it's like not, hey, come here because our facility is better than Oregon, right? Because it's clearly not. So, what are these ways that you can maybe get a little bit of an edge using these new tools that are going to be available? And it sounds like I said, Wazoo's not waiting around for this to come, because I think everybody recognizes it's happening.
It is, and honestly, for you guys, I think that means that your coaching change couldn't have happened at a better time, right? Because then you have somebody like Rolovich, who's well known for being an eclectic personality and being much more of a player's coach, to be able to come in and say, not only am I going to teach you football, and we're going to win some football games, and we're going to be fun and exciting, but I'm going to let you talk on Twitter. I'm going to let you... and we're going to, as a department, we're going to teach you about how to engage politically or how to engage civically and how to do that in a responsible way, or how to pick a cause or a charity that's important to you and how to engage with that. And then you have a local community where your athletes carry so much weight, in part because you're a little bit more rural, that you're going to get that experience in a much different way than you would if you were in Los Angeles or in the Bay Area. And that's not going to appeal for everybody, just like, Pullman's not for everybody. But that I think that's a real compelling pitch, and we've seen, I think, a couple of schools in similar situations who are doing that right now, like Nebraska, absolutely getting out in front of this NIL stuff. Georgia Tech is absolutely getting out and doing it. UNLV and Miami, Ohio, have already hired brand consultants. They're going to make that part of the pitch. I think that's going to be true in a lot of places, but not everybody is going to be able to sell that the same way. And that's fine. That's one of the fun things about college athletics, right? Some people are going to sell their facilities, their location, their history, tradition, and this can potentially be one of the big advantages that Washington State can take to market. If I'm a fan, I would embrace this new reality. I would be excited about it, and not just because it's better for the athletes.
Yeah, and I think we had an example of how this can work for players in Pullman, just obviously very recently with Gardner Minshew, because the country saw Minshew mania for when his rookie season at Jacksonville happened the very year before at WSU, and he is if you asked many Cougs generation, doesn't matter what generation, he might be the most famous, the most favorite WSU football player of all time for even people that are in their 60s at this point. He was such a big star in his 1 year, and we actually were even guilty of a lot of places were using his likeness, and we are guilty of this as well. We realized what we were doing and took it down, but so that mustache and those sunglasses and that headband, it's such a distinct likeness that you're seeing T-shirts and lots of different merchandise, and everyone's wearing a mustache on their lip at the football games. He had such a brand. He did not tweet, Instagram, or anything the whole entire football season. I think his last Instagram was the day before it started, and then the day after they got their bowl game or something. So he just didn't say a word, and he still had such an impact, just basically off the promotion of what WSU did. And so if WSU can then help him monetize that, he didn't get a dime of any of these T-shirts or anything that people sold, or any of these sunglasses or headbands or anything. And so if you set it up in a different way, suddenly they're once he starts building that brand awareness they can be like, okay, he can make some money while he's at WSU before he goes to the NFL, anything. And I already see players that are like that at WSU. Obviously, Jeff, you think of like Max Borghi right now, like he is insanely popular at WSU.
Yeah.
People would, like, I think you're talking about social media, obviously the ads and stuff. Like if Max Borghi was selling stuff like Coug stuff or anything, like people would buy it. Like, and if Max Borghi was offering Cameo, like the Cameo thing, like people would buy that for their kid's birthday or their birthday or whatever. Like he could be making money off of this stuff already. Because we had a player that left early that ended up James Williams 2 years ago that, he didn't get drafted. But he kind of left early because he was having a kid, and he just needed to go get money, and he immediately signed up a Cameo account and was having like Coug fans were like buying him to send them like birthday messages and stuff, but because he had no opportunity to capitalize on his fame in school, but he obviously had fame because people were buying that stuff. Like people were seeking him out because he was famous. Like he's Boobie Williams. Like he's the guy that scored that amazing touchdown against Oregon. People know who he is. Like, and so like this is why Jeff and I would try to make this point. Like Pullman creates like these demigods in football because it's like, what else do you have? And so there's an opportunity for players to come who maybe were going to be a third string wide receiver on USC, maybe they're a first string wide receiver at WSU, and they're the star, and they can market themselves. So,
yeah, I think the last thing I'd just quickly add is I don't think it's just for football. I think this opportunity exists. I think really, honestly, particularly for women who do not have the same professional earning potential in most sports as men do, and who, by and large, have larger followings on social networks that maybe you and I don't utilize as much. But if you come to Pullman and you're just an okay basketball player and you got a big YouTube page or a big Instagram page, you can do very well for yourself financially. And Olympic sport athletes in smaller towns, I think, will shock the world with some of the opportunities that they're going to potentially have. I think far and away the big winners here. Yeah, there's going to be some football players that are going to make a lot of money, but there's going to be a lot of softball players that are going to make some real money too.
Yeah, I think that's the part. People tend to think about the stuff that pops first to mind, like, oh, someone's going to, make an endorsement to be on a, sell Chevrolets for the local dealership, whatever, on a TV commercial. But I think you're hitting it on the head, which is, YouTube videos or, these sort of like, microtransaction type things where, they can trade on that a little bit to make some cash. So I think that's the opportunity. Those are the opportunities that maybe people don't think about that are there. I do want to touch on one other thing before we cut you loose,
sure.
And because you are staying up late, my friend.
Oh, buddy, I am, but I've still got some other editing I got to do. So don't worry about it. I have made preparations for a longer night. This is my work. This is my office hours now.
I love it. Well, yeah, because you have children, and that's. I love to tell the story about. So I think you know this. I'm an English teacher, and it's like I grade papers after my kids go to bed. Like there's this window between like 8 and maybe like 9:30 where I can actually do something before my brain finally gives out, but yet I also get enough quiet to get something done. So. Something you wrote about a couple of newsletters ago was about the idea of FBS programs dropping to FCS, and WSU fans are pretty familiar with one program that did that. Probably one of the more recent high-profile examples of that was Idaho dropping down, and they were in just sort of a really shitty situation where they were originally they were in a conference that was sort of a disaster with the Sun Belt, given that they are nowhere near the Sun Belt,
no.
Right? And so they were in this like mess of a conference, and then they got kicked out because they were so far away and everything else. They played as an independent briefly, and then finally decided, you know what, screw it, we should go back to FCS where they had been, 30 years ago before they or 40 years ago before they bumped up. And so this question always comes up, why more programs don't do this? And so, I'm curious for your take on that. My personal take is just like I tend to be a huge fan of Occam's razor. And, the simplest explanation is the best one. And I look around and there are still programs that are killing each other to move up to FBS, right? And so I'm like, look, these institutions are all run by smart people. Like, they're not idiots. And so there must be value there that maybe you can't measure in dollars or whatever. But if these people are knocking each other over to try and get up to FBS when they can, and almost nobody is dropping down to FCS, maybe it's not that bad of a deal. Or and maybe you can explore this as well. Maybe it's just institutional inertia and face saving and whatever to stay up. So kind of where do you land on this, and how do you feel about maybe whether more programs should seriously consider this?
Sure. So I've researched the Idaho situation. I think for a while over the past couple of years. I've talked to Idaho's beat writer. We've talked to my business partner has talked to Chuck Staben, who was the university president there. We've kind of tried to evaluate how that's looked both immediately after the fact and a couple years after the fact. And I think the more I study this, I think it's clear Idaho's a little bit of a special case, both with their historic ties with the Big Sky, with the fact that their travel costs at the FCS level are actually substantially less than they would be at FBS, and that's not always the case. So I think there's three big reasons why schools don't do this, even though we can look on paper and say, like, there's no chance in hell you're ever going to be even an average FBS program, right? We can look at UMass and New Mexico State and Akron and be like, you have sucked for 30 years. Like, who are you kidding? So one of those reasons is that you don't actually save a ton of money in the short term. Television money at the FCS level, it's not very good. If you're in the Big Sky or the Missouri Valley or the Colonial Athletic, you might get maybe a low six-figure television distribution. And if you're in the MAC or if you're in Conference USA or the Mountain West, you're making a very high six figures, low seven figures. And losing that college football playoff distribution isn't nothing. The amount of money that you can command as a buy game is also very different. If you're a crappy FBS team and you go to Clemson or you go to Ohio State to get murdered, you're going to make $1.7 million. And if you're a team like Kent State, you might play 2 or 3 of those a season and make over $3 million. And if you're Eastern Washington or if you're Montana, your going rate is like a quarter of that. You're making $400,000. So you look at those two things here, and you weigh that against the savings that you have in your salaries and in your travel and in your scholarships. In the short term, it's often a wash. Over the long term, you definitely save money at FCS. You don't have nearly the cost increase for salaries or facilities or for any of these supplemental expenses. But if you're a university president, you're going to get dunked on real bad. Or an athletic director, you're going to get dunked on real bad as you make that choice. And your school's not going to see the benefits of it for like 6 to 8 years. So why the hell are you going to do it? Like there's so many negatives, and you're not going to get credit for those positives. And that's, I think, what really happened at Idaho is right now, you're not really enjoying those positives. They're not even really an especially competitive team at the Big Sky. They probably will see those benefits down the line, but nobody who made that choice is going to get credit for it. So that's a big reason. The other big reason is that for a lot of these schools that might need to drop down, they don't have a great FCS league partner. If you're a school in the MAC, you might actually have increased travel costs at the FCS level. If you're used to busing everywhere within Ohio, and now you have to go to Western Iowa and the Dakotas or Southern Missouri, and you might have to fly a little bit more. If you're in the South, you might have to fly a little bit more. There's not really a great stable Southern FCS league at the moment. If you're out west, Big Sky might split at the FCS level. Like that's something I really think is going to happen in a couple of years, and you have instability there. So you really need a perfect situation for this to make sense. And I honestly think it still does make sense for a couple of FBS programs. There's some out there that I think are just getting no brand benefit from. Can I cuss on this podcast?
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. So if you're just getting the ever-living shit kicked out of you every week, like UMass is, you're not getting any brand benefit from being in FBS. Like, people are aware that your school exists, but what they're tying what they're remembering isn't that you have a great English department. It's that you're absolutely terrible at football.
Well, and they were a really good FCS program too, right?
They won a national title. They were pretty strong, and the Colonial Athletic is a really good league. I look at, I grew up in Ohio. I look at Kent State. I look at Akron. I look at some of these other schools there that have been bad for my entire lifetime, and they're playing in front of 3,000 fans, and they're 40-point underdogs every time they play a Big Ten team. You're not getting any advantage out of that. Like, everybody in Ohio already knows who you are. The fact that you guys are aware that Kent State exists does not help Kent State. So there, I think you really do need to have some difficult math conversations. But I'm not surprised that more schools haven't made that jump. And I've asked around and talked to people at different athletic departments, even with Corona and with this big financial crunch. I would put the over-under on schools that make that change in 3 years at 1. I think it is more likely you will see FCS teams drop down or drop out of football entirely, or conference realignment to happen, than another team to drop down. The benefits you get just don't manifest themselves in the short term.
Craig?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I gave a little monologue there.
But so a quick tie into this. So it's not something that's talked about, but there's like one guy in particular that comes on WSU comes on our blog once every 3 years and just rants about this. Like, says that WSU should be in the Mountain West. And when you talk about those TV figures,
is
that
that
you
guy
just
Craig
mentioned,
Thompson?
What?
Is that guy Craig Thompson? Like, that's the only.
No, he's some Coug fan. Like, he's
Okay.
some WSU fan. I don't know, but he said WSU should be in the Mountain West. But when you're talking about these TV figures, you're talking about Kent State gets $1 million, like on
Maybe.
like maybe of TV, like TV money. Like, and the Mountain West teams outside of like Boise State probably aren't doing a heck of a lot better than that, I imagine.
They just signed a new deal, but it's like 2.
Yeah,
it's not great either.
And WSU's on the low end of FBS team, or of Power 5 teams, but still getting $25 million right now or whatever. Like, when you put these numbers in perspective of what the FCS schools can do and the FBS schools, and then it's a whole nother, like, it's exponential when you come up to a Power 5 conference. So if you're a WSU fan and you've ever considered, like, oh, we might win some more if we're in the Mountain West, it's like, well, we wouldn't have all these advantages that we currently have and still playing those Mountain West teams. So as a Mountain West team. So.
Yeah, no, that's a completely ridiculous. Like, every team that's not in the Power Conference right now would commit many felonies to get into a Power 5 conference to get access to that money.
I know. Well, every time realignment comes up, like, inevitably there are Boise State fans who are like, oh, the Pac-12's looking at us. I'm like, they're not looking at you. You're like wishful thinking, man. Like, that ain't happening.
No, not unless you're you developed a grad school like overnight.
Right. The only people who think that are Boise State fans.
Well, it's because it happened for Utah, but Utah is such a much larger research university. Yeah, and just a more well-rounded university with a longer academic history, a longer even athletic history, and it's like Utah was like that prime team to make that jump. Like, they're like a golden. That was such a unique example of a school, in Utah, that it was kind of, at this point, I think back, it's kind of weird that they weren't in a major conference at that point.
Yeah, I'll just add this as somebody who's written about this a ton. For realignment, institutional fit doesn't get talked about enough. Like, I think one of the things that we really have to kind of change in our minds is that a lot of the base assumptions about conference realignment from like the last decade about like TV markets and expanding to grow your television, like that's not the world that we live in right now. Those assumptions aren't really valid. But institutional fit is a big deal, and it's not as big of a deal for every conference, but like the Big Ten will care a lot about your graduate research profile and what kind of school you are, and the Pac-12 cares a lot.
Yeah.
If they
Pac-12
didn't care,
cares a lot.
if they didn't care, BYU would be in this league. Like that is why they're not in there. And if they didn't care, San Diego State would be in this league. Now, at some point, everybody gets desperate enough, and they might have to make compromises, and that's why Arizona and Arizona State are in this league, because USC made them, even though nobody else really wanted them. But like that's the idea that would change, and you're going to bring in a Boise, or you're going to bring in like a Fresno or Hawaii or something like that. That's just West Virginia message board fiction. It's simply not how it works.
West Virginia message board fiction.
Dude, yeah.
I
I say this as somebody who literally wrote a book that included conference realignment fan fiction. Like,
right.
Yeah.
That stuff is something else, man.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
man.
Coug Center pretty much owes like a lot of its readership to the conference realignment
That was
that we did a decade ago.
That was where the Brian Floyd that we know today was
That
born.
is. That was
Conference
honestly,
realignment.
and
that's not a joke. That is
No,
100%.
I believe it. Like that part of the internet, created a lot of college football bloggers today. I think I have my job today because of the Big 12.
There was it was me, it was you, Craig, it was Brian, and it was Mark Sandritter. We were like the four horsemen all over all that realignment stuff. That was search engine gold, my man. Search engine gold.
Yep. There's one thing Floyd told me when I worked for him. It's always blog the realignment bullshit.
Yeah, dude, people love that.
They do.
We learned that lesson a long time ago.
They do, and man, even when it's talking about Division III or America East or whatever, like those are almost all of the biggest stories on Extra Points are about some kind of realignment. Like, I'll just give the people what they want.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, hey, Matt, why don't we make some space here for you to tell? So we've referenced it a number of times. Why don't you tell the good people what you do? Because I am a subscriber to Extra Points. I'm a paid subscriber to Extra Points.
See,
so there's an endorsement for you. Why don't you tell people about Extra Points?
Sure. So Extra Points is the newsletter that I run. It covers all of the off the field issues that shape college athletics. So there's going to be stories in here about legal developments, about financial developments, about higher ed policy, about demographic shifts, name, image, and likeness, all this other stuff that actually, these are college football stories, but they're not about like Alabama's depth chart. You can subscribe to it for free and get 2 newsletters a week in your inbox, or you can pay, which is what I would love for you to do. It costs $7 a month or $70 a year, and then you get 4. You get a podcast a month, and we are going to merge with another podcast, another newsletter and podcasting service in like a week and a half or so. I'm going to announce the full details shortly, which I think will add some additional like heft, investigative muscle, and FOIA muscle to this operation. So you can find it at mattbrown.substack.com. That's for Extra Points, and you can find me on Twitter at mattbrownep. I'm sharing the newsletters all the time, and you can find it and subscribe. And if you're interested, if you've been listening to the podcast this long, if you're interested in these kind of stories, I think you'll really love this newsletter because it's stuff that you're not going to find easily anywhere else. Yeah,
man. Well, that's a hell of a sales job. How many podcasts have you been on giving that speech?
A lot. I'm taking every bit of earned media I can get right now, man. Like I've been on a bunch of SB Nation podcasts. I'm doing radio from Portland, Maine to Morgantown, West Virginia to Jonesboro, Arkansas. No, like that's you got to do it, and I'm happy to do it here because I like you guys. I like your site,
it.
But
I love it.
That's the gig now.
You got to get on
fantastic.
Ricky O'Donnell's Twitch stream during a Western Illinois Final Four run or something.
I gotta. He lives like 2 miles from me. It sucks because with Corona right now we can't all just go get a beer. I got to find a way that we could potentially work together. I should write like some fake Extra Points, story about how Western Illinois grew from nothing to this basketball powerhouse thanks to Ricky Charisma.
That'd be fantastic.
I know, and then it's going to be great trying to explain that to like the athletic director at like Vermont who reads this thing. He's like, "What the hell is he talking about?" Like, well, it's because I'm terminally online, my friend.
Hey, fun fact, I went to grad school at Vermont, so.
Go Catamounts, baby.
Go Catamounts.
That's fantastic. Well, Matt, I'm super excited for what this holds for you, because, sometimes shitty stuff happens, but I love the concept. I love what you're doing. And one of the reasons I'm happy to support you is because you were always awesome to me. Some of our readers might remember that I took a trip to Pullman a little over a year ago and got to write some cool stories out of that. And other people might also remember the 6,000 word behemoth I wrote about being a college football fan. So if you thought that was awesome, Matt is responsible for helping me make that awesome. If you thought that was terrible and overwrought, then blame it on
Caroline's
Matt.
fault.
It's totally his fault. So yeah, but seriously though, I always appreciated working with you, and I'm super excited for what you're gonna do here. So thanks for jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, of course, it's my pleasure. It's unfortunate that things ended the way that they did, but I'm grateful that over the last 7 years I got to build relationships with a lot of really smart guys like you. It was my pleasure.
All right. Well, maybe we should take a break, Craig. What do you think?
Yeah, I think SB Nation would appreciate that.
All right. Commercial time. And we are back, Craig.
That was fun, man. That was Matt was a lot of fun to talk to. What an incredibly smart guy. What a loss for SB Nation, but
I know. SB Nation really screwed the pooch on that one.
Yeah.
A number of other decisions that were made, but whatever. I guess that's neither here nor there.
Where does Spencer Hall work now?
God, damn it! I've tweeted this before, but imagine a world where your decision matrix leads you to pay that guy to go away. And same thing with Matt. I legitimately meant what I said when we were talking earlier is, he was a great person to work for. And if you couldn't gather from listening to him, he really is a really smart dude, incredible, just institutional knowledge of college football. So one thing he didn't talk about when we talked, and so I gave him a chance to plug himself. He plugged the newsletter, which you should totally subscribe to. Listen, even if you don't want to do the paid subscription, give him the free subscription. Go sign up for that, and I'll go ahead and tweet that out also, so that people know where to find that. But one thing he didn't talk about, he actually wrote a book too, and the book was called "What If?" What if? And he explores all these different scenarios. What if this thing had gone differently? What if, realignment? He mentioned that, right? He mentioned, realignment. And so anyway, it just is, so he wrote a book. He's just a really smart dude, knows a lot about the history of college football, which I'm sure you gathered listening to it. And it was super cool to have him on. And I would say, not that I had low expectations, but I wasn't sure what to expect. And I would say that interview definitely exceeded my expectations. And my expectations were fairly lofty heading into it.
Yeah, it's I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know Matt as well as you do, and all that. You've obviously sung his praises to me before, but it was your idea to bring him on. I'm so glad you did. I think that was super relevant to WSU, and I hope our listeners enjoyed it. But now we can talk about some other things. Oh, by the way, that I mentioned Ricky O'Donnell at some point. If you want something fun just to follow during this time, go to Ricky O'Donnell's Substack that is about Western Illinois. He is using the most recent college basketball video game, College Hoops 2K8, and he's taking Western Illinois. He's coaching them, and it's just a lot of fun. I don't know if you follow it, Jeff, but I follow it. It's super fun reading his path to taking them to championships and stuff. And then there's another guy who is now doing fan fiction based on this. So it's been quite a fun thing. So SB Nation has had, still does, they're not all gone, but had some incredibly talented people that were let go. They have always had just an incredible set of talent, and literally what SB Nation let go could create the greatest website on earth. And I would say Matt, follow him, Ricky, follow him. Like all these old SB Nation writers. I know that Jason Kirk and Spencer Hall are writing a book that sounds amazing. And so like I'm looking forward to a lot of what these guys can do and these women can do on their own. But yeah, RAP, the OG team, and
I know I've been around. You and I have been around SB Nation long enough to see.
I remember
many people come and go.
I remember when Every Day Should Be Saturday became a part of SB Nation.
That's right.
It was so awesome.
I remember when Bomani Jones worked for SB Nation.
Those videos were amazing.
Yes, they were.
That was probably my favorite.
Yes, they were.
Videos at SB Nation. Well, I love John Boy's videos too, but
yeah.
But man, like those were so good, and I think there was only like 6 of them. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but it was pretty good.
Yeah. Anyways, so you probably don't want to hear about Jeff and I reminiscing about the old days at SB Nation anymore.
Probably not. Probably not.
But yeah, so there's kook stuff to talk about. We took a week off. Honestly, that you can go back, listen to our Black Lives Matter podcast. There's just a lot going on. It's hard to do stuff like this right now, but
yeah, and all of that still stands. I mean, we have not moved on. I'm still actively recruiting. Searching for people of color to add to our staff. It's very much front of mind with me in terms of my teaching practice, thinking about how I can work with anti-racist initiatives at my school. Leading into next school year. I know you, after we recorded, went and marched in Tacoma. So, I mean, these are things that are still front of mind for us.
Oh, another thing I'm also doing, I might extend it, but right now it ends on Friday the 19th, Juneteenth. We should probably address this when we talk about beer. So I am raffling off 30, 5 6-pack sets of barrel-aged Skookum beer. What I'm asking is you get an entry for every $10 you donate to a charity. I have a list of charities that I've shared. If you go to my Twitter, they're Black Lives Matter related. One of the most popular ones has been the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which is a good one. And because a lot of companies will match that. So I've had some people that have gotten bonus entries because their company has matched it, which is really cool. But so far we've raised $972.23, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool.
That's about 4 times what I paid for the beer. So that's really cool to see. So on the topic of Skookum, we have sang their praises many, many, many times on this podcast. Their lead brewer, Hollis, he's one of the best in the West Coast and the best in the U.S. I fully believe that, and he's an excellent dude. And the things I'm about to say about Skookum have nothing to do with him, and more about the ownership of Skookum. So they just so I'll just tell you about a little bit of controversy that went around with them. There was an Arlington area video that included some, it was kind of lighthearted, included the police, and it was promoting the police, and there was people wearing shirts that say "cops rule" or the police rule or something, and it was just in the moment it didn't come off very well, and so Skookum got quite a bit of pushback on that. They took that video down, which was not their video. They were sharing another video that was a whole Arlington community thing. Arlington, Washington, that's where they're located. They took that down. They put up kind of a vanilla Black Lives Matter, we support black people, we hate racism type post. And then they got a lot of pushback from some of their followers on that. And so they took that post down. And then they came back they put the original video back up, and the owner says that he basically apologized for having decisions made for the business that didn't align with his beliefs. And so what I read from that, and what many read from that, is that he does not align with Black Lives Matter movement, and he doesn't, so yeah, I'm not saying like, he needs to align with the Black Lives Matter movement specifically, but just from the reading of it, I didn't feel very good about it. So I thought a nice way to turn it around is, well, I'm going to use your Skilcum beer to raise money for the Black Lives Matter movement. So that's what I'm doing. If the beer is delicious, and like I said, Hollis is an amazing brewer. I've got barley wines and stouts and saisons and beautiful beers in there. I don't want to give them up, but I thought it would be a really cool way to raise money, and I'm really happy with how much money has been raised so far. But yeah, if you want to do that, you can shoot me an email at podcastversuseveryone@gmail.com with a screenshot of a receipt, which is dated after June 10th. That's when I posted it. And then, or get at me on Twitter at the Craig Powers, and I can get you entered to win some of that delicious beer. But anyways, so off my soapbox now, jumping off. What are you drinking right now, Jeff?
What I am drinking right now, so I'm on my second beer of the show, thanks to Matt's awesome interview. I started with the Fort George Fanzine IPA, which is a collaboration with Grains of Wrath. So that is fantastic, and actually better than I remember from last year. I don't know if this year's edition is actually better, or if just sort of my palate
vibes more with what you like now.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
That's perhaps. So really excellent. And then I have since moved on to Lagunitas Phase Change, which is a seasonally unexpected wet hopped juicy ale. So, which is okay. It's okay.
So when they say seasonally unexpected wet hop juicy ale, do you know what they mean? Do they explain it?
I don't think it's explained. Wait, hold on. I think it's meant fresh hop, kinda. Yes, I don't know. Like they don't explain it very well in the can, but it seems like that's what they're throwing back to, is a fresh hop type style. Yes.
Yeah. So they have they have their own sort of like hop. Like they've kind of been trying to, because the beer, so Lagunitas has been very much they very much love marijuana, cannabis. Like they actually used to have huge festivals. So they have a beer that's called like Double Secret Shutdown Ale, because they literally got shut down once because they were having a festival and people are just getting buzz. This is before weed was legal, and but they have, because they like to make beers that have the flavor of that, and fresh hops, because hops have the same flavor compounds as weed, aroma compounds, I should say. The fresh hops usually typically give the more dank kind of aromas. So they've actually worked really hard to kind of figure out a way to, what they call it is a hop liquefaction process. And another beer they've used in it was called Born Again yesterday. So they've tried it again, apparently. And Jeff, you've had fresh hop beers. You've had not fresh hop beers. Does this have a fresh hop vibe to it?
It does. Yeah.
Kind of that kind of grassy, kind of earthiness to it.
For sure.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah, it's good.
Well, they're using that Heineken money well.
They are. It's good beer. Solid beer. What about you? What you drinking?
Well, I've had a few so far. The one that I wanted to highlight was Chuckanut Brewing. Citraleaf Pilsner. Chuckanut is... they've been around for a while, 2008. So that's like, 100 in brewery years at this point, in craft brewery years.
Kind of like blog years.
Yeah, they're up in Bellingham, and then they have another brewery a little bit further south. I can't remember what town. But yeah, they good food up at the brewery in Bellingham. I can say, but they also they focus specifically on German styles. So like styles that they would make in Germany under the what is like the Reinheitsgebot or whatever, like where they can't, they have very specific brewing laws, and it kind of limits the styles they make. But they make probably, like, I've heard a lot of people say the best German style beers in the U.S., like of any brewery. Their Bohemian style Pilsner is fantastic. This is and then they have a German style Pilsner, also great. They do so many different Pilsners, Vienna Lager, like all these German styles, and then German, Austria, whatever styles, and then they have this one was kind of a new one, the Citra Leaf. So because obviously Citra is a new world hop, you could say. It's not one of the Saaz or Goldings or anything from Europe. But this is it's fantastic. Like, it's just so good, so clean. The Citra adds a little more bitterness and a little bit more inviting aroma. It's just an excellent beer. We've been fortunate during the shutdown that they've sent some of their bottles that their bottles have typically been reserved for just be sold in their brewery and then maybe very local bottle shops, but they've been sending their bottles out, and I've been enjoying it. I've been drinking a lot of their bottles and stuff. They come in these 500 milliliter, which is just over 16 ounces bottles. I've been enjoying it. Very delicious. Then I had E9 Black Helmet IPA.
Ooh.
And then I had
E9's IPAs, by the way, have been just on point in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, they've been crushing it ever since they went to that canning line too. This is a really cool label. It's like all black with like chrome lettering. Like, it just looks awesome. And this tasty beer really got that kind of like like a sweet, like modern IPA. Had this kind of like bubblegum aspect to it. It was very interesting. Definitely, like, they've definitely evolved. Like, Shane, the brewery there, has evolved those beers quite a bit to kind of reach like more modern palates. It's funny, he leaves the name the same, so it's the same old beers that were on Untapped. Like, so like people, like, you look at the pictures of what people were drinking then and now, and it's like completely different. But,
yeah.
And now I'm drinking a Holy Mountain White Lodge, which is a wit beer, and it's like just in a way, way better version of Blue Moon, basically.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, so that was a lot of beer talk today. I told you, Jeff, this is going to be a 2-hour podcast, and we are well on our way to that.
We are heading towards that. Sarah's going to be sending me texts pretty soon, be like, when are you coming to bed? Yeah, someday. Someday.
It depends what face comes after that message, based on how quickly Jeff leaves.
That's true.
So I won't touch that again. And then I've had 3 beers.
Attaboy.
Okay, so let's talk about the Cougs.
There's actually shit that's happened, dude.
I know. Well, what should we talk about first?
Basketball recruit.
I mean, obviously that's our favorite.
Hell yeah, because it's our show. We
exciting.
talk about what we want.
So yeah, like Kyle Smith and our boy John Andershek and that staff just killed it again. Like,
I know people were like, "Oh man, it's such a bummer we lost Marvin Cannon." And this is not to disparage Marvin Cannon, mind you, but yeah, continue.
We basically got a guy with the same, sort of level of athleticism, more size, but with infinite more potential. Carlos Rosario, class of 20, so he's this recruiting class.
Yeah, this recruiting class.
Rated on 247. Okay, this is kind of a weird thing for me. So 247 rates him as an 89 and a 3-star,
which is like just a very like a hair below a 4-star.
A hair below a 4-star.
Yes.
But then their composite rates him a 93 or almost 94 and a 4-star and like the 119th best recruit in the country, I'll tell you, I do not know what other rating they are using for that composite. And I messaged Jamie Vinnick that writes for Kook Fan, and he didn't know either.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, because I looked to find, like, ESPN has not rated him. Rivals, but to be fair, ESPN hasn't rated anybody. ESPN will tell you that we have... ESPN will tell you we have
shitty.
one player in our recruiting class this year, and Rivals will tell you we have 2.
Yeah.
So they aren't great sources. Maybe my guess is maybe 247 actually reevaluated him, and then just their system has some kind of weird thing.
Yeah.
Because really, he didn't really hit a lot of teams' radars until very recently. All of his offers that are listed came May 29th and after. So
yep. So that just simply screams a guy who was assumed to not be eligible, and then he was able to get eligible. So that's basically it. Like whenever you see that, when you see like a guy who's clearly talented, and then he doesn't commit, he doesn't sign during the regular signing period, and then all of a sudden you see a flood of offers like in May and June. That's it. And it's typically a guy who gets his credits sorted out, gets his diploma, and gets cleared by the clearinghouse. And all of a sudden now everybody's like, oh yeah, we'll give you a scholarship. But gets
the right help to do that, finds the right person to help him do that clearinghouse stuff.
Yep. So I will say this, that, the thread here between, through the recruits that Kyle Smith has landed, Carlos Rosario is really not that different in terms of the way they went about recruiting, the other high-profile recruit from California, Deshaun Jackson. That's a guy who Kyle Smith had been on for years, right? Like had identified him young, had been recruiting him to San Francisco. And then once, he sort of blew up, had some injury issues, but, was able to recruit him to WSU in a way that he probably wouldn't have been able to at San Francisco. Rosario is kind of the same deal. Rosario in his gave some comments to Kook Fan, basically just saying like, look, they've been in contact with me for a long time, and they've been on me for a long time. And, so I just felt comfortable. Like, Kyle Smith, apparently, it seems, just has this way of identifying guys and, staying in contact with them. And when they come available, he's ready to give them a landing spot. This landing spot came about because of the departure of Marvin Cannon. I don't think they're connected. I don't think it's they had Carlos Rosario coming in, and so Marvin Cannon was going out. Like, I don't think it was that, but, if it was what it appears on face value to be, which is, Cannon decided to transfer, and so they had an opening, when you've got guys like this that you kind of keep an eye on and keep in contact with, and, he's a 6'7" guard, basically. Like, I know he's listed as a forward, but I'm pretty sure he's basically like a CJ Ellaby 3. Like a 3-2 kind of swing guy. It's exciting, dude. Like this recruiting class, it's like a top 100 recruiting class.
It's top 50.
Yeah. That is, I don't think people need to be told this, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway. That is highly unusual for WSU basketball.
They're checking in at number 49 on 247 right now,
which is crazy pants.
That's nuts. Like, a top 100 is one thing, but like, you have 2 like 4-star guys. You have 2 top 150 level guys. And then you just have 3 other 3-stars that are, you got guys that are full of potential. Like, a lot of these guys are just incredibly upside, high athleticism. It's just a class, and we can talk about, we've already like sung our praises of this class when they signed Deshaun Jackson. We'll wait for Carlos Rosario to sign. I don't know if it's like a period when he can't or not. I think he can sign.
So he can sign a financial aid agreement right now. Yeah, and I'm sure that's what he's going to do.
Yeah. So There's a lot he did. Like, one is cool. He did his little thing, and he put on WSU hat. He only had one hat, but still, whatever. Hat ceremony.
We want a hat dance.
It was turned around. Like, he just didn't, to his credit, don't buy all those hats you're not going to use. You don't need those hats.
We want a hat dance.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool hat, too. It's like this black with, like, I don't know where he got it from. But yeah, so this class is just exactly the type of class that can not, like, this is not about building a program. This is changing a program.
Yep.
This is creating a program that goes to, like, you could see, like, this class could be a multiple NCAA tournament class. Like, you look at these guys. Because it's diverse in the type of players. You have 2 bigs. You have 2 small forward. You have 2 guards and a small forward. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's a team. Like, it's a team, and you bring in, like, big guys that WSU struggles to get. And a 6'7" wing that is, like, Rosario legit. Like, I've only seen a few of his tapes, but he's long. He's probably...
Wait,
like,
you saying he's long and athletic?
Yes, he absolutely is. This dude, we're going to have dudes that dunk on dudes. Like, this is, like... We've seen Noah try that this year. But now we're going to have, like... the whole team is just dunking on dudes. Like, it's... But, like, regardless of that, like, they're just good players. Like, this is the type of class that just builds a program into being, like, relevant regularly.
Yep.
And honestly, with the guys that they threw in, like, that they were able to put together just last year in the limited time they have, like bringing in Noah, for example, and the way they've been able to put this class together, it makes me, like, so optimistic that they can do this regularly, and then they can, like, because if you get 2 classes, like if you get this class and then you get another class like this back to back, like, suddenly they're like, you know, hello, like, Tony Bennett era years were, like, good. Like, even just these guys, like, I mean, like, this has, like, you and I talked about when Smith was hired, we knew he was a good coach. But we just, was he going to, you know, be an NCAA tournament? We don't know. He's never done it. He's never done that because he's never had, you know, a big program that had expectations of going to an NCAA tournament. But, like, with the guys that he's brought in, I'm like, this is beyond what I imagined recruiting-wise. He already showed us what he can do coaching-wise. Like, I'm so fucking stoked for this, like, basketball program right now. Like, I'm so fired up to see what's going to happen with this. Like, he has the play now. Like, he has a system. He's putting in the players. Like, and you just know, like, he's going to coach them well because he just has proven that he can do that. And he's got a great staff. And, like, it's just, this is exciting. Like, basketball school, here we come again. Yeah,
it's. I don't know if next year is the year that they take the big leap.
Right.
You know, a lot of young guys. Right. I mean, like, 2/3 of the roster is going to be freshmen and sophomores. So might be asking a lot to have a big leap. In fact, I would not be shocked if they ended up being about as good next year as they were this year. I think some of that will depend on CJ Ellaby. Obviously, if he comes back as we are expecting, then, you know, I think it'll depend a lot on just how good he is. And whether he can sort of carry them a little bit, and then how much the freshmen can contribute right off the top. I think, you know, there's sort of this interesting dynamic where, you know, it really depends to me on whether CJ Ellaby sticks around for his senior year or not. Right. I think that the general assumption is, you know, if a guy tests the water after his freshman year, tests the water after his sophomore year, and really is as good as we expect during his junior year, then he's going to leave. But, you know, it really depends. I mean, Ellaby has said during this process this year that what he's looking for really is basically a first-round guarantee is what he's looking for. And, you know, the assumption is at this point.
He said he got an offer for a 2-way contract.
Yeah, last year, which was, you know, I mean, a 2-way contract, you know.
Which is what Frank's got.
Yeah.
And
and in Frank's situation, that's not a bad deal. As a freshman coming out, that's not a great deal. So, I mean, I it all depends on who's willing to guarantee what and what he really wants to go for. But if he does stick around,
by the way, who reported that the 2-way deal LOB? I feel like we should credit them.
I'm trying to remember. I never actually read the whole story, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It might have been Theo.
Yeah,
I'm not positive. You know what I think it was, and maybe someone will fact check us on this. I think he did a radio interview, and then that was then turned into a story.
Oh, okay.
I think that's right. But regardless, if he sticks around for his senior year, and all these guys that we're super excited about as freshmen are then sophomores, and all these sophomores that we're excited about are juniors. Noah Williams, Markovetsky, DJ Rodman are juniors. I think 2021, 2022 is really the year where you could be like, yeah, they could actually be really damn good that year. So, but it's regardless, this upcoming year, it really just depends on how good these freshmen are. Like if they're amazing, then this team could really do some crazy stuff, but I don't know. I tend to think that's kind of a big ask.
Yeah. But in terms of the long term, you basically have 5 guys who would be your best recruit in a lot of recent classes.
Yep.
Like on paper. So that's, you have 2 guys that are rated 4-star by at least one service. And then there's some high 3 stars, and so it's just, it's exciting. Going to have that length and athleticism that we always heard that we would have. I don't know. I want basketball season to start.
I'm kind of right there with you.
I want it to be in like the video game that I was talking about with Ricky O'Donnell. Like, can I just be on 2K8 and I can simulate and like see how good they're going to be?
Yeah, but first we have a baby, probably football season. At the very least, we have recruiting. Yeah. We have football recruiting.
And Nick Rolovich has his quarterback.
Are you excited?
I'm not excited.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not excited. I'm just not excited.
Yeah, it's is that
I do know what you mean, but continue.
It's just this we're looking at this recruiting class and we're just waiting to be wowed, and it has really yet to happen, and so you're just hoping that you get to see, and then the quarterback is the one that we've typically been ready to be wowed by. Now the kid, like Xavier Ward, like there's nothing against him, like, he's just not like nationally like a big recruit, but he could be. He's different, that recruit. Obviously we're in Rolovich's offense. He's looking for more quarterbacks that can run. A dual threat quarterback, if you will. We saw his quarterback, whose name I'm blanking on, run like a pretty quick 40 time at the combine this year. I think he ran like a 4.6, and he did get drafted. But I think before Gordon got drafted. But Ward is I don't know, man. He's fine. Like it's good.
I will say I think he's an interesting prospect.
Yeah, I think definitely. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
There have been a lot of there are a lot of guys in this class where I don't think like, wow, that's a really interesting guy. Like,
we have he's also the second Xavier in the class.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, I mean,
Xavier.
I look up and down this class, and we've talked about this before, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But I just I don't see guys in the class where I go, "Ooh, that's an intriguing guy. Like that's super interesting." I could see that guy maybe developing into a monster. There's not a lot of that in this class, to be honest. But this guy does seem like maybe he does fit that mold. That if we're looking for guys who are kind of toolsy, right? Anybody who's a baseball fan, will be familiar with that term, right? That somebody's toolsy. Xavier Ward is toolsy. He is, number one, he's young for his class. He's only 16 right now, which is sort of insane. As a high school teacher, I'll be honest, even mildly athletically inclined boys are typically held back rather than moved forward. That's a pretty typical move in the last couple decades by parents to sort of, take their athletically minded kid and start him a little bit late. And by the way, as a teacher, males who get held back, I think it's great. Like there's a little added maturity on the back end by the time you get to high school, and so I don't mind that. So Xavier Ward he's a different kid in that respect. He is young. He's 16 right now. I would presume he's going to be 17 when he starts his senior year, because that would be super weird otherwise. But he's definitely young, and that's important to note. Reports on him, big hands, big arm. Okay, whatever, I guess. Fairly mobile, but, really seems like a guy with a lot of raw tools who is growing into his frame, and, maybe his best days are ahead of him. So, I don't mind guys like that. I really don't, especially with the quarterback situation. Obviously, you've got, Cameron Cooper and Gunnar Cruz, who are both young. And then Jaden DeLora, who's obviously coming in as a freshman. So you've got three. We got quarterbacks. Yeah, pretty talented quarterbacks who you got to figure at least one of those guys is probably going to transfer out. I would imagine that the person who wins the quarterback job this fall is going to be either Cruz or Cooper, and it wouldn't shock me if the loser of that ended up, taken off. So, you can afford to take on a guy who's pretty toolsy, who needs to develop a little bit and maybe has a high ceiling, even if his floor is also pretty low. So yeah, I feel good about this. There are a lot of guys in this class where I go, but he's one where I go, yeah, I'm intrigued.
Well, and I will say, like we've been lamenting the recruiting class so far, but WSU still is 6th currently, and that's not out of just because they have more commits than the other teams. Like really, they don't. They have 8 commits. Like their average rating of commits is pretty similar to the 7, 8, 9 teams. So it's like maybe some other schools kind of in that second tier of recruiting in the Pac-12 are also struggling with in this pandemic, and maybe we shouldn't be fretting too much, but maybe it's a situation where the rich are getting richer because it's easier to commit to the name program if you can't visit anywhere and talk to anybody.
Yep, I think that's 100% true. And then the charm of Pullman obviously is visiting. So, yep. Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like the guys at the top are doing just fine, but
yep.
Although USC does not have a 5-star, only 10 4-stars.
Ugh. What are you doing, Clay Helton? Loser.
How can you build a program with only 4 stars?
Although Washington did just land their quarterback in this class, a grad transfer from Portland State.
Portland State.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Sacramento State.
Hey,
my bad.
You're forgetting about their next keyword.
Yeah, I know. That was funny. You mentioned Jamie Vinnick earlier. His joke was that this was an attempt to clear the QB room before Sam Heward shows up, which plausible. Totally plausible.
Try to get people to transfer out.
Yeah, like
this guy's going to start out. You better transfer out.
Yeah, probably time to go.
Got the legacy coming in.
Yeah. Yep. But anyway. What else do we have to talk about? What did we miss? Oh, Mississippi State.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't
I don't
wait.
know. I'm going to be in my 50s when that game is played. My kids will be in college.
You gonna go to Starkville with me?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Like, my oldest kid will be, graduated from college?
We're gonna take
Ish.
Josh to Starkville, dude. We're gonna take him to Starkville with us.
Yeah. That'll be funny.
My daughter will be, let's see.
She'll
the
be
first
12.
game she'll be 12.
13.
The second game she'll be 13. She'll probably be equally as obnoxious as she is right now as a 2-year-old. So.
What are you talking about? Your kid is adorable.
Yeah.
I only have to see her every once in a while, though.
Yeah, when we're like on Zoom and she goes, I want to see Jeff.
And I'm like, hi, B. And then she's just like.
And then she leaves.
See you later. Yes, that is true.
But yes, WSU has booked a home and home with Mississippi State.
Yeah.
In 2030 and 2031.
What are the odds that 60 whatever year old Mike Leach is still coaching at Mississippi State?
69. Nice.
Yeah.
Low,
nice.
in my opinion.
Extremely low.
I've never thought of Leach as someone that would coach that long. And then I've also, I don't know, I don't envision an SEC coach sticking around that long that isn't, a national championship contender guy.
Yeah.
And we know Leach is not going to be that guy.
No.
So, and I looked up all-time Mississippi State. They've had one coach that has coached more than 10 years, and that was, I believe, Jack Sherrill from like 91 to 2003.
Jackie Sherrill, former WSU coach.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Guaranteed he's going to coach more than 10 years. But yeah, I don't know if Leach locks into his 7-8 win, he could stay around for that long. I feel like Mississippi State would be, well, maybe they wouldn't be fine with it. I don't know. But I don't know. I feel like Leach will just not want to do it anymore by then when he's 69 years old.
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll see. But that would be that. I think it'd be pretty fun, like by then, especially if Leach came back to Pullman, because it would just be fun. Like just
it
to
would
talk,
be ridiculous,
especially if Rolo works out.
Yeah.
Now, if WSU gets plunged into the darkness, like after Price left. It probably wouldn't be as much fun.
Yeah, that actually would suck. I'll be honest about that.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, this is cool. Like regardless of the Leach connection or anything, to get a home and home with an SEC team is really cool. Like, and even if it's 10 years down the road and they're going to buy the game out or whatever, I don't see Mississippi State as a program that would buy the game out. But maybe they would. But still, it's pretty cool, like to think about having a home and home with an SEC team, and then that being one of a string of home and homes with Power 5 schools that they have in the next 12 years. Like, again, you have that cynical side that says, will those actually be home and homes? Will college football exist?
Teams are buying out less. I think we've mentioned that before, but teams are buying out way less than what they used
also
to.
Like WSU makes, like when Wisconsin bought out the last one or whatever, WSU makes double the revenue a home game because of the suites and the CAF. So we can pay a bigger share. So it's not like they can go, well, we'd rather just play Akron and make that money and pay them $1 million, like Matt said, to play us, and we'd make more money. It might actually, they'd make enough money and it'd be an interesting enough game that they'll come out. So we'll see with Wisconsin in 3 years here. But yeah, it's now we got Mississippi State. Again, it's like, what do you say? Like it's so far. It's over a decade from now. it's yeah, I don't know about you, Jeff. When I see it, like college football teams book these series in the far distant future, which is pretty regular now, I always immediately think to how old I'm going to be when that game happens.
Yes, absolutely.
What will my life look like then? Like, what is the world going to look like in 2030? Like, what the hell?
Like you said, will college football still exist?
Yeah, will
Who
college
knows?
football still exist in 2030? I don't know.
Will Coug Center still be around? Maybe. Probably. I don't know.
Will we still be writing?
Will I still be alive? I think so.
God,
I'm not sure, though. That was more.
That got
sorry.
dark. Jesus. Yes, Jeff, you will.
But like I said, like this Mississippi State game, like my oldest son, he's 13. He'll be 23 when that game is played. Like
That's
I can't even imagine a world where my 13-year-old is 23. So.
Well, I can't. Yeah, and I can't imagine a world where my toddler is a teenager. That's horrifying.
It is actually. I'll just tell you, it's as bad as you imagine. Just so you know.
I know. I remember when your teenager was a toddler.
Yes, you do. I know, right? Good Lord.
Doesn't seem that long ago,
no,
actually.
it wasn't.
So actually,
it really wasn't that long ago.
This game will be here before we know it.
Yeah, that's the thing. The older I get, the more I'm like, yeah, these games, like, oh my God, that's so far away. And now it's like, Wisconsin's like 2 years from now.
Sitting here at 35 and thinking about being 46 when Mississippi State comes to Pullman. That's a lot of aging.
I know. I'm gonna be
maybe
50 something.
Like, oh yeah, dude.
Come on, man. Come on. Killing me. I'm dying a little.
My dad was. Let's see. He had me when he was. I was born.
Oh man, I have played this game so many times.
My dad was 41 when I went to WSU. So
same deal with my parents. Like. My dad. Sometimes I do this game where I think like, okay, when my dad was the age that I am now, I was blank, and my kid is blank, and same thing. Like when my dad was the age that I am now, I was like, I don't know, I think senior at Wazoo, right? Something like that. And and I have a middle schooler, so yeah.
When my dad was the age I am now,
trips me the hell out.
I guess I was like 12, and I only have a toddler. I started way later.
Me too, but yeah, that should be fun though. Like it's cool. Like so they're lining up Power 5, basically one Power 5 game a year.
Yeah, they got
conference game a year,
except for Wisconsin, and then Kansas State and Kansas.
Yeah, the Kansas one is spread out, but like
it's like I think
Wisconsin.
But the Kansas is different because they actually come to Pullman first,
right?
And that's one of the few schools I think that we could do that with.
I do know that. So sometimes people stress out about the fact that the return trip to Pullman is always second on most of these. I did a story a few years ago. I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but I did a story a few years ago looking at the WSU football schedule and trying to figure out like the whole, sequence of who's coming when and is there anything to read into it. And the athletic department insisted to me that there was nothing to read into the fact that, we were typically going there first and then the other team was coming second. And the explanation they had was simply that it just worked out that way because the biggest thing that they want to do is try and get 7 home games in Pullman every year. Mm-hmm. That's the goal. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's what they're always trying to do. So when basically they're in a cycle right now where when they sign an agreement with a team, it just works out that they go there first and come here second because of the way that the home and road schedules with the Pac-12 work out and the way that they've scheduled their other non-conference games. And I don't know that I totally believe it, but that's basic. That was their explanation. And it does make some logical sense. This idea that basically when they are playing at one of these Power 5 teams, that the other 2 non-conference games will be home games, and then they've got 5 Pac-12 home games that year. So they're trying to get 7 basically. So that's kind of how it's working out. And so when they are at home with one of those teams that maybe they play 2 other small conference teams at home that year as well, and away you go. You get your 7 home games on those years when you've got 4 Pac-12 home games. So, yeah.
Yeah. As you recall, we actually played Boise State. They came to Pullman second. I don't think anyone was worried about them buying out the back end.
And let's just be honest, like the buyouts don't happen quite as much as they did. So that's something people should remember also. They just don't happen as much. Athletic departments are a lot more reticent to just drop $1 million on buying out a game than they used to be. So.
I will say I'm excited for a team like Wisconsin to play in Pullman.
Dude, that's gonna be so much fun.
But I am way more excited to go to Madison and
hell yeah
play.
Oh, we are going. We are absolutely going. We got to get PJ to fly in from Germany. Like, we got to do this shit.
I can't remember what tailgate it was, but BA and I planned this out. Like, we were getting like commitments from significant others and everything. We're going to, like, what do we could do with a kid? And
I got to make this happen. Freaking flyer miles. Let's go.
Book now. The flights are cheap.
I'm sure. Can you book them that far in advance?
No, that's a joke.
I was like, wait, what? Well, I just, I know how much you travel, and I'm thinking, wait, does Craig know something I don't know? Like, I didn't think you could book them that far in advance, but
you cannot book
maybe.
A flight over 2 years in advance. Usually,
I don't know.
I think a year is a limit. But even a lot of airlines don't let you go that far.
Yeah.
Well, anything else?
No, I think that's it, man. We've gone. Good night. This can be like an hour and 45.
Well, it's
good
not
show.
2 hours.
Good show.
Not our longest episode.
Yeah, and they can find us on the internets, on the emails.
Yeah, if you want to try to win good Skookum beer,
I should do that.
Us, Podcast versus Everyone. Donate. Look at my Twitter at the Craig Powers. Have all the details on there. My pinned tweet will offer up your details there. I might extend it just because I talked about it on the podcast, and so I might extend it. I had a symbolic date of Juneteenth, but maybe I'll push it back.
My goodness.
So much good beer. Send us an email, podcastversuseveryone@gmail.com. Jeff at podversuseveryone. I've already said my Twitter. That's all the relevant information. You should subscribe.
Yeah. Subscribe to Matt Brown, too.
You should subscribe to Matt Brown. You should rate us 5 stars. You should subscribe to Ricky O'Donnell's Western Illinois.
Should do all that stuff.
Substack.
Hell yeah.
I've been following that pretty hard. I love it. Every time they get to a Sweet 16, he live streams the computer simulation of the game. It's more engaged. Like, it's like, you are starved for sports content when you're just like watching a highlight package of a computer simulated video game of a game that came out in 2008 or 2007. Like,
it's so great. I'm so pissed off that I don't have my NCAA 14 game anymore. Like, I'm just so frustrated by that. I'd be playing that all the time right now. I still have my 360, Crossing. Although I think it doesn't actually work.
I've only have time for Animal Crossing right now. I'm sorry.
Oh,
That's all I have time for. I have to dig for fossils and fish and build things. It's just I'm busy. Although my little dude has a custom-made Cougs shirt and a Wazoo hat, so he's a badass. And some Gardner Minshew aviators and some cut-off jean shorts. So he is looking good.
I think I may need to move on to my NBA 2K Sonics team that has Zion Williamson on it.
By the way, I talked about Ricky O'Donnell. His next project he's starting this week, he's taking one of his most popular players from the college game and putting him into 2K with a custom Sonics team.
Ooh.
So he's doing a Sonics. Now he's doing a Sonics team.
My man. That's what I'm talking about. Go Sonics.
Go Sonics. All right.
Okay.
All right. Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter, Craig.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Bye.